If you've been told that's just perimenopause and felt dismissed, this conversation is for you. Hormonal transitions are real and they are rarely the whole story. In this episode, we're going to talk about what often gets missed when everything is labeled as perimenopause and how gut health, stress, blood sugar, and the nervous system often play a bigger role than anyone is talking about. Hi, I'm Janell Yule, and this is The Transformation Show. So let's start by zooming out a little bit, because it's all perimenopause is what we are seeing all over social media, especially if you are a woman, probably 35 or older. So as a woman who is almost 44, I'll be 44 next month, this is all over my social media feed. And while I appreciate it, because when I reflect back growing up, when my mom hit this stage in her life, there was absolutely zero information, zero education, and zero conversation around perimenopause. So I am so appreciative that that is not the experience that I am having. I think it's a bigger conversation than what is really happening or what some women are perceiving it as. And the next thing I'm about to say, I say with so much love because it is something that I needed to hear a couple years ago when I turned 40, turned 41, is that when we classify everything that we are experiencing under perimenopause, it's almost like we're using it as an excuse to not take responsibility for doing the things that we need to in order to take care of ourselves and in order to make changes in our life. So it's like we are like passing the buck of like, oh, it's just I'm getting older, which we'll get to here momentarily. This is just perimenopause, and it's kind of like there's and not that we're saying there's nothing we can do about it, but we're just like, oh, that's just perimenopause. Instead of really truly taking an honest look at how we are living, the environment that these hormones are needing to show up in, and often these changes that need to be made or that we need to create awareness around are not the changes with your nutrition and your exercise. If you're anything like me, I was eating whole foods. I was not eating a standard American diet. I was moving my body every single day. I was strength training. And yet I still was I was stuck and I was experiencing some symptoms. I was experiencing weight loss resistance. I was experiencing fatigue. Those were the two really big ones for me. And so if you got a little fired up by me saying like that you're using perimenopause as an excuse, that's just information. And again, when I was in it, I couldn't see that that's what I was doing as well. And I probably wasn't, if I'm being truly honest, I probably wasn't even conscious of it. And if someone would have said that to me, I probably would have gotten a little fired up and had some resistance too. Now, on the flip side of that, the good news is that when we take back our personal power and we say, okay, yes, I am a woman in my late 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe even 60s. And so, yes, hormonal shifts are real. Like these happen. This is part of our physiology. But when we take that personal power back and we get the support that we need, and we start making lasting, sustainable changes, and we do it from a place of awareness rather than this place, and I've talked about this before, this place of just adding more and doing more and seeing this on social media and bouncing back and forth between this program and this workout and this diet and all of these things, that's when everything shifts. And so part of the reason why we believe that, like we say this, like everything is perimenopause, is because of these age-based narratives. And, we often get stuck in this, like, Is it too late? Am I too old? Can I actually change? Can I actually change my health? And I am here to tell you firsthand, you absolutely can. I have 2 one-on-one clients right now that I am currently working with. One is 74 and one is 76. And I have to tell you that I am so inspired by them because they don't operate from a place of I'm too old and it's too late. And quite honestly, I worked with a woman about 4 years ago who was 80 years old, and she was a delight. And so I really appreciate when people are like, no, I'm not too old. And so when we start to buy into that, like, well, I'm just getting older and this just happens when I'm getting older, again, we're giving away our power. And it's not that there is nothing that we can do about this. There are so many things that we can do. Or the other thing that I'm seeing happen, and we're going to have a much deeper conversation about this next week, is that hormone replacement therapy is being offered and being sold, I guess we'll say, as the solution. And while hormone therapy can be really, really helpful, really, really helpful, it is a bridge. It is not the end all be all. And while I'm really encouraged that black box labels were recently lifted on things like estrogen, there's again, with hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, there is also a bigger conversation that needs to be had. So we're going to put a pin in that and come back to that next week. So I just want you to pay attention to, do you find yourself using language like, it's just my hormones, or that's just perimenopause, or I'm getting older, so that's just the way it is? Because again, all of those narratives, our body hears everything that we say and things we say to it as well. And so we start to embody that identity, and again, we give our power away. And so the other thing that is happening here too is that there is a limited diagnostic depth. So we're not addressing the whole woman, because as a woman, we are more than just our hormones. We are more, and there's other systems in the body, and we are also our patterns. We are also our stories. We are also the environment that we live in. And by the time we get to midlife, we have a lot behind that, meaning like, what got us here? Like, what is our story? What were we doing for years and years and years? And I was having a conversation with one of my mentors last week that I worked with a couple years ago, and I continue to work with. And that conversation was around a health debt. And one of the ways that he explains this that I really, really appreciate and that really, really helped me is that the things that I was experiencing, and really for me, it was this reoccurring thing. It was like, okay, I have found myself back to a similar place that I have been before. Like, I recognize this. And so I would like to not find myself back here in another 2, 3, 4 years. And so he talked about the health debt that we create. And so by the time we get to midlife, we have, in some regards, created a health debt. And that can be from, under eating, skipping meals. It could be from chronic stress. It could be from overtraining. It can be from this place of like overfunctioning, overdoing, this dysregulation in our nervous system. It could also be from things like eating a standard American diet, or, having multiple, antibiotic exposures over time. Like, there's a whole lot of things that can do that. And so we find ourselves, like, let's just say we find ourselves in, $1 million worth of debt. We start to pay that debt back over time. And so let's say, we paid back 2 million. It's like we're still focused on the 8 million that we have yet to pay back, rather than focusing on, wait a second, I'm making progress here. And I think that's another thing to really understand and embrace is that we didn't get here overnight. Like, none of us got to the place that we are at overnight, especially when we are experiencing reoccurring symptoms or chronic symptoms. And here's the other thing that I'm hearing from women coming to me after seeing their doctors, and this is not a negative slide at Western medicine doctors and providers by any means, because there are a lot of amazing ones out there and we need them, and we need Western medicine. And what I'm hearing is women going to their doctors and expressing things like weight loss resistance, or things like bloating that just won't quit, or things like fatigue, hair falling out, lack of energy, lack of sex drive, like just kind of a whole host of these things. And doctors are just being like, oh, that's just perimenopause. And then the conversation stops. And they're not taking an opportunity to look deeper. And so this is where a more functional approach comes in. This is where functional testing may come in. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that later, and where that can really, really come into the conversation. So here's the truth. Hormones act within a system, and they are tied to other things in that system. So in our system, they are tied to things like the gut, the liver, the nervous system. One of my mentors coined a term called TAG disorder, and TAG is an acronym for thyroid, adrenals, and gut, because none of these systems operate in isolation. And I always explain this to people because I work with a lot of people on their gut health. They may be having those chronic digestive symptoms. They may be on a proton pump inhibitor because they're experiencing acid reflux. They may have an autoimmune condition, so we're addressing this from an immune standpoint. So like things are showing up digestively, and I always explain to them is that yes, we are working on the gut, and we don't just work on the gut. We also bring in the liver and the gallbladder, if they still have one. We also bring in the thyroid and the adrenals, because none of these systems operate in isolation. Now, that can be frustrating when we've got symptoms and we've got dysfunction in one of these systems, because it can carry over to the other systems. And on the flip side, when we're positively impacting one of these systems, then we're positively impacting the other systems because they are connected. So we can look at that both ways. And so in midlife, as hormones start to shift, that will impact the gut. It impacts the gut lining. It can impact what's happening in the gut. It also impacts your adrenals, and it can actually put more stress on the adrenals. So this is something that not a lot of people know is, like, if you are not taking bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and you are postmenopausal, you are still making small amounts of estrogen and progesterone. It's just that where that production in your body is happening is different. So where it used to happen in the ovaries, at this stage, your ovaries have said, we have done our job, peace out, we are done, you're welcome. And that production needs to happen somewhere. And so it happens in the adrenals. And so if the adrenals are already taxed, if you already have, more of a depleted or maybe an overactive system when it comes to your adrenals and your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, it will impact things. And so, if the adrenals don't have a lot of reserve, that will also impact the shift and how fast that shift happens in perimenopause. So the adrenals are a huge, huge component here. And that isn't something that Western medicine is looking at, because they're only looking at cortisol, the stress hormone, if it is super, super sky high, as in Cushing's, or super, 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 super low, as in Addison's disease. And there is a whole host of what is happening in between there. And so that's, where something like a Dutch test, a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, where we look at cortisol production over the course of a 24-hour cycle, can be really helpful. So the missing piece, again, it's a bigger conversation than just perimenopause, and not everything is perimenopause, is looking at the gut. What is happening in the gut? What is happening with your gut microbiome? What is happening with your immune system? Because that your immune system is housed in the gut. What is happening with your gut microbiome? What is happening with your mucosal barrier? What is then happening from an inflammatory standpoint? Are you getting inflammation from foods that you're eating? Are you feeling inflammation from stress? Are you getting inflammation from environmental toxins? And also looking at stress. And this is a big one. And this is where a lot of women in midlife start to express that their tolerance for stress and their BS meter, quite honestly, or their ability to care, I'm gonna use that word instead of a different word, is a lot lower. And, I think that while that can be frustrating, or it doesn't feel like we have the resiliency that we used to have, I think that this is where this stage in life is a beautiful opportunity, and really our body is asking us to do things differently moving forward because of the resources that it had, and likely the debt, if we go back to that analogy, that we have created. And then we need to look at glucose. So this is where, again, our hormones are being, like, these foundational things, your gut, your nervous system stress, your inflammation, your blood sugar, are foundations, and these are informing your hormones, and they're impacting them. They're informing and impacting hormones like cortisol, insulin. So for example, if you are fasting too long, it is going to impact cortisol, blood sugar, insulin, and sometimes not in a good way. Sometimes it's actually doing the complete opposite that you want it to. They're also impacting things like leptin. So if you are running from the tiger all day long, if you are shooting yourself out of a cannon from the moment you wake up, that is going to impact your leptin, which is your satiety hormone. It is the hormone in the brain that looks and manages your energy stores and says, okay, we can release weight, or we need to hold on to weight. And leptin is antagonistic of cortisol, meaning cortisol is going to block leptin. And so again, this is a larger conversation than just looking at sex hormones and how they're shifting in midlife. This is, cortisol also impacts progesterone. And so this is where women sometimes will go on hormone replacement therapy thinking that when I start this, everything is magically going to shift, and you can be taking progesterone, and yet if you change nothing about your environment, you change nothing about your inputs, and your cortisol is still being impacted, whether that's too high, too low, right? We want a Goldilocks effect when it comes to something like cortisol, then that is going to negatively impact progesterone. So again, we need to zoom out and really look at a bigger picture here, rather than just like it being a narrow conversation. So what could look like perimenopause can actually be inflammation from food, environmental toxins, stress, like I talked about. And really what this looked like for me personally is I was depleted, if I'm being blatantly honest. And I just kept repeating a pattern of just pushing more, pushing through, doing more, like just keep going. Just, I just got to keep showing up. And what could have been labeled as perimenopause really was a dysregulated nervous system and depletion when it came to my adrenals, which then resulted in things like fatigue and weight loss resistance. And so if I would have just said, oh, I'm just going to chalk this up to perimenopause, and I'm going to share more about my hormone replacement therapy story next week, I wouldn't have been able to get my energy back. My digestion and my gut health is better than it's ever been. And I've been able to release 20 pounds and just feel better in my body. And so this is where you really want to start with pattern recognition over labels. And the reality is we like labels. As our brains like labels, as humans, we like labels because they can be very validating. And this is where I hear and see a lot of women, when they finally get a diagnosis, it actually feels really good to them because they finally feel validated. And I get that. And I just want to caution you and have you pause and also become aware of where these labels, like I started out, like where is this label around perimenopause actually keeping you stuck? Where is the label or the diagnosis that you have an autoimmune condition actually keeping you stuck and actually keeping you from feeling the way that you want to feel and living your life in the way that you want to live your life? And that's going to look different for everyone. And so this also may require getting some deeper testing done, like a GI map test, which is a stool test, which is going to look at your gut microbiome. It's going to look at gut pathogens. It's going to look at your immune system. It's going to show you how well you are getting out excess estrogen from your body. Or looking at something like a hair tissue mineral analysis test that's going to look at your minerals. It's going to be a stress report card for your system. And, I had a client recently that she's been on this perimenopause journey. She's used hormone replacement therapy. It has helped her in so many ways. And yet, when we dug a little bit deeper, when we looked at her hair tissue mineral analysis, when we looked at her stress report card, we could see what was happening with her metabolism, and we could see what was happening from an adrenal and a thyroid perspective with her minerals. And she really needed some additional support. And she started to do that support, and her results have been amazing. She's sleeping through the night without any sleep support. She's still taking her progesterone, her oral micronized progesterone, but she's sleeping through the night without any sleep support. And that has been years where she has not been able to do that. So your system can be depleted. Your immune system can be suppressed. So really starting to begin to approach things from an input rather than chasing outputs. Take the focus off of all of us, and I wanted to do it too. I just wanted to strangle food. I just wanted to be like, do I need to remove sugar indefinitely? Do I need to do this? I wanted to strangle the food. And don't get me wrong, food is important. It absolutely is important. And yes, there is something to, calories do matter. Quality matters a lot, and calories do also matter and need to come into the conversation. And yet, we want to think about what is the environment, so this, that the food is going into. What is the environment that whatever you are doing is going into? Because that is going to give you a lot of information as to how your body is going to respond. So what I want to leave you with is, if you are a woman in midlife, which I would assume that you are if you are listening or watching this, is that hormonal transitions matter. And so does the full picture of what your body is navigating. And if you've ever been told this is just perimenopause and felt like it didn't explain everything, you are probably correct. And I would love to hear from you in the comments about which specific symptom felt brushed off. And for some women, the next helpful step isn't necessarily action, it's clarity. And so that's exactly what I designed the Metabolic Jumpstart for, helping you to understand what the body has been responding to without overwhelm. And so you can learn more through the link below. If these conversations resonate with you, make sure that you are hitting that bell icon on YouTube to subscribe, or if you are in your favorite podcast platform, make sure you are subscribed so that you don't miss anything new. And I look forward to seeing you back here next week. And as always, have faith and take action.